from this point forward. So again, you can see here that clear link between agency and hope. So I want to invite you to take a pause here for about a minute or two and maybe journal for a bit. Okay, and if you don't have a journal nearby, feel free to use the chat to be your journal. But what barriers to agency are part of the reality in your school? And how can we create hope for agency in our school? So take a moment, reflect on that in your journal. Again, if you don't have a journal, feel free to write in the chat. I'm sure we would all love to see your thinking. What are the initial barriers to agency? Again, based on your reality, your perception, your perspective. These might be rooted in personal and cultural meaning. They might be rooted in systemic issues. They might be rooted in assumptions that we've made about how to teach or how children learn. And again, all of these things lead up to us creating beliefs and actions. And sometimes those actions and beliefs are barriers. Good, good. I'll see a lot of people adding into the chat. Okay, lots of good stuff there. All right, so wrap up your thinking there. Make this your last sentence. Write your last word. Put a punctuation at the end, and let's move on. So when you dig into the idea of agency, you have to dig into the work of Albert Bandura. Okay, he'd be considered the father of agency. Okay, and when we think of agency, Bandura says that agency refers to the human capability, okay, to influence one's functioning in the course of events by one's actions. Okay? You can see how the sense of hope lives in Bandura's definition. Bandura goes on just to name some requirements for agency to happen. Okay, and I want you to really think about this. You know, when we start limiting agency to the ideas of voice, choice, and hope, voice, choice, and ownership, do we make sure that these requirements are in place? And he named 4 of them. Intentionality is one. And this is the big picture. Can you see the big picture? Can you see the plan and the strategy to get there? Okay, can you foresee that? Can you have forethought? Meaning, can you set a goal? Can you vision the success of reaching that goal? Okay, then there's self-reactiveness. Okay, this is where our motivation lives. Some might say this is where our grit lives. And some might say this is where our skills to get going live. So probably a lot of social and emotional learning skills live here in this self-reactiveness. And then the final one is self-reflectiveness. And this is a key part of the revised PYP, because this is where we monitor and adjust along the way. We think as an assessor in the midst of the agency. okay? And we can monitor how well we are doing towards our goal, how well we are, moving forward with our strategy of that big picture. And can we adjust along the way? And when we start thinking about barriers in our classroom to agency, how much of it is that the students don't know the big picture and plan because we own it, they don't? How much of it is because we're not allowing them to engage in goal setting and envisioning that what success looks like? How much of it is that we fail to motivate them and give them the skills to get going? And how much of it is we do not allow them to deviate, even though they know they are not on the right path and they need to make an adjustment? Okay, how many of those barriers do we put in place? And just like you're doing right now, a little pause after that, hopefully mind-blowing point there. What new barriers do you see existing to agency in regards to perhaps those 4 areas? And how do we start to overcome these barriers? Okay, so again, take a moment. If you want to stay private, go ahead and use your journal, but please join us in the chat. Share your ideas here. Why is it many of you agreed with so much of what I said? Then where's that barrier? Which part of those 4? Is it we don't give them the big picture? We don't let them set the goals and envision success? Do we not motivate them and give them the skills to get going? And do we not allow them to deviate? Where are your barriers now? Lenny says, I think creating some no or low risk opportunities for our teachers, for example, having a week of off timetable activities without grading, without time restrictions, right? Those are systemic issues right there. Those are systemic issues in regards to our schools, but they can also be systemic issues in regards to our own policies within our classroom. Our own self-made policies might be restricting some of those things, but also school level timetables, things like that. Yes, requirements around grading. So many schools, say, well, you need to have 2 grades a week in your grade book for parents and things, and how much that controls things, some of these things do. Good, thank you, Raja. Teachers have lots of requirements to cover, right, when it comes to teaching and learning, and time is a pressure, right? And this idea of coverage, right? And we know the idea with learning is uncovered, right? But our schools are operating from this mentality of coverage, okay? And so we're more focused on teaching rather than learning. So great. Thank you for engaging there. Let's keep going. So again, go back to the ladder of inference. How much of our reality is connected to these deeply rooted mindsets and beliefs, which might be based on our version of reality or our perceptions of what truth is. And then the assumptions that we make about students when we are not willing to self-examine ourselves, they create blindness to our own implicit and explicit biases, as well as sometimes prejudicial and racist thoughts and actions. Okay. And sometimes our lack of cultural intelligence or situational awareness can create deficit mentalities towards students and populations that we might refer to as others. So I want to move into the work of Dr. Duncan Andrade. And his first name is Jeff, by the way, if you want to look him up. Great work here. And he studied this idea of hope. Okay. And he identified two types of hope. There's false hope and there's critical hope. So let's dig into what he considers false hope to start with. One of these false hopes that's rooted in inequity is optimism. Okay, this comes from maybe a very individualistic ideals. This is that pick yourself up by your bootstraps type of mentality. It ignores the systemic inequities and such, and said, that I was successful, why can't they type idea. So this optimism, okay? Then there's the idea of mythical hope. Okay, and mythical hope is where there are false narratives, okay, that we have arrived at the solution, that when we trace back our community's work in regards to racism or inequities, we see all of these moments. Maybe there was some laws and legislation that were passed by our governments. Maybe there were people of color elected to positions of power within our community. And so we have this dream, that allows us to of what it is, but it's ignoring past truths. And Andrade likes to think of this as hope that lives on a tightrope. Okay, if you could imagine walking across the tightrope, how fearful and how unbalanced that seems at times, and so that is part of that mythical hope. And then finally, there's what he calls hope deferred, and this is where we start blaming the system. Okay, we might say it's the district's fault. We might say, oh, that's just the way our society is. Okay. We might have dreams of a collective utopia. We might have think that automatically these children are going to ascend to middle and upper class lives and such, but it does not do anything about the immediate situation. And that's why it's hope deferred. It's down the road. Okay. And these types of false hope, they produce chronic stress, okay, of these accumulating negative stressors and the few resources to cope. Okay. If we don't recognize these stressors, then we don't supply the social emotional learning strategies and such to help students be able to cope. We don't set them up with community resources. And sometimes the reality is false hope is all we have to offer because we are unwilling to confront the harsh realities of social inequality and that inequality within our pedagogy, and that fact that we are unwilling to cultivate students' control of their destiny by making agency a more important part of our classroom. Okay. I know that sounds harsh, but again, like I said earlier, some of these conversations are uncomfortable. So another type of false hope is this idea of othering, okay? So instead of reflecting and changing teaching in ourselves, we tend to other these minorities, these Black, Indigenous people of color, we might, or a certain population. It's a concept that was made popular through the works of Lisa Delpit or Bell Hooks, if you're an avid reader of this work. These are oppressive classifications, okay? They create this idea of superiority versus inferiority when we start othering people. It's like a dominant culture versus subordinate culture. It leads to racism, classism, xenophobia, sexism, even homophobia, and etc. knowing that our brains are wired for survival. So guess what? Bias is a natural process of what our brains do in order to protect us. Okay. Our amygdala can overreact, but we have to recognize that we have a malleable brain. We can change and we can start to see people differently. Thank you, Juan. We will get to some strategies here in just a bit to move away from this oppressive acts, this false sense of false hope, and be able to move forward with some of that critical hope. So I'm so happy for you to join me, my T-shares buddy. Now, ultimately, let's take it back to the image of the child, okay? So what about that image of the child? That they are competent, capable, worthy of hope and agency. They're worthy of being seen as human. But if we have othered them, okay, or establishing that idea of false hope, this is not going to be the case. Okay, we create the opposite. We create children that don't see themselves as competent and capable. We don't see them as worthy of hope and agency. Okay, we might obstruct agency in our classroom because we don't think these students are worthy of agency or worthy of being seen as human. This suppression of agency is prevalent in schools, especially those serving Black, Indigenous, people of color. And it's again fueled by our mental models of those children. Okay, it serves as a form of oppression through the education we give. So let's pause again. What false hopes exist in your school? And how might we overcome these? Go ahead and use your journal or the chat again to share with us. Identify, notice, and name. The first tool towards action is we have to notice and name the inequities, the issues. I know in our school, we are dealing with a lot of implicit bias. We also are, dealing with a lot of inequities in regards to gifted and talented and honors education, such. That blaming of families, right? And good point, okay? Those parents don't care. You hear it all the time, okay? You don't know that. You're right. Just because they don't adhere to your assumptions, your conclusions, your mental models of what an engaged family is, or right? Good job, Lenny, with even in our wealthier schools, okay? There are things that we don't see. Again, we are seeing reality through that selective lens, okay? All right, I'm gonna move us forward. So an unequitable education devalues the prior knowledge and experience of what these other groups like Black, Indigenous people of color bring to classrooms or schools. Okay. We don't value the funds of knowledge. Okay. We think they don't know anything. Okay. Or they don't have this experience. Okay. And that's because we don't value the stories of their knowledge and skills. We don't value the stories of their experiences. We don't look at it from a new perspective to see what assets all children bring. Okay. Everything that they bring to us is an asset. And if we look at it from that asset-based lens, then we can start to make use of it in the classroom. Bandura talks about this idea of moral disengagement. Okay, and so when and he even had this moral disengagement theory, and with it, we can seek out why we don't act more often on our own agency as teachers, specifically as white or wealthy teachers. Okay, when we know the education being offered is often less than moral, less than the education being offered in schools with predominantly white or wealthy students. Okay, this moral disengagement doesn't alter our moral standards. Okay, it just provides a means for us to just work around those standards. Okay, in ways that just say kind of dehumanize people and strip the morality of it from our own harmful behavior and our responsibility for it. And Bandura identified 4 types of this moral disengagement. One of them is the behavior locus. And this is where, the righteous end justifies the harmful mean. When we just control kids, then we say, well, it's going to serve them better when they get to middle school. It's going to serve them better when they get to college. It's going to serve them better in life and such. And so we have our own, idea there, this righteous end that we are going to be the savior of these students. Because of our actions. Okay, the agency locus is where we evade that personal accountability for our harmful action by displacing responsibility. So, well, that's the district's fault. That's the parents' fault. That's society's fault. That's the system's fault. Okay, and then the outcome locus. Well, this is where we, those outcomes that when we think of things like the prison, the school to prison pipeline and stuff, those ideas are so far in the future, they're out of sight and out of mind. Okay, and then the victim locus. Okay, that they brought this up on themselves. They're less than human, and we may even attribute like animalistic qualities to them. Okay, they're behaving like animals. They have no civility. All of those types of things where we dehumanize, individuals, even students within our classroom. All right, I'm going to move us past this for the sake of time, but I want you to start thinking about how agency is oppressed in your school and how we continue to overcome that agency. Now, some of the solutions. One of these is this idea of voice, okay? And so here, and look at what voice does in connection to self-efficacy, okay? That when teachers have a voice in decision making, they're 3 times more likely to encourage students to be leaders and make decisions. If you're a school leader right now, you need to make sure teachers have a voice in your school, because then they will also give voice to students. Sometimes as teachers, it's our mindset about students. Okay, look at these facts from Quaglia. Okay, 52% of students believe teachers are willing to learn from them. That means 48%, nearly half of our students don't think we are willing to learn from the kids. Okay, they, over almost half don't think they have any decision making in school. okay? They're not brought to the table. They're not there to be part of the conversation, okay? Even though teachers will say, I encourage students all the time to make decisions. The reality is the students are not, they're not seeing them. They're not aware of them. And perhaps they're not decisions that matter. They're decisions that have already been made, okay? And this is more of a tokenism opportunity for their voice. But when a student has voice, three times more likely to build that sense of self-worth. They're 5 times more likely to be engaged, and they're 5 times more likely to have a sense of purpose in school. All because they feel like they have a voice because they were invited to the table. So be thinking, how might student voice be used to improve student self-efficacy in your school? How do we bring them in? Just like Kim says here, okay, in the chat. Love it, Kim. But the decisions are lower level, like seating charts, book choices, what center they want to go to, right? That's when we narrow agency to this voice, choice, and ownership perception, that's what we immediately go to. They need to be part of the bigger, more relevant decisions that are made about them, part of any decisions involved in the school. That's what voice matters, okay? This is how we're going to operate. This is what we're going to learn about. This is how we're going to learn it, okay? Where is student voice in those conversations, okay? And, some of the bigger things that matter, okay? When it comes to procedures in your classroom, okay? This isn't working. Do you hear me? Do my actions speak loud enough for you that something is not? Can we adjust because we can recognize that there are issues and problems? Students see this, they know this. Can we listen to this? Are we willing to listen to it? And again, when my actions are oppressing agency, I realize that these actions are driven by mental models. And I need to walk back down the ladder one step at a time. What beliefs have made me decide to strip agency or oppress agency? What conclusions did I draw that led me to this belief? And what assumptions did I make about my students? And what personal cultural meaning did I add to the realities in my classroom that led me here? Okay. And then what data have I observed and what data have I not been observing from the realities? And how can I then use this unseen data to change the outcomes as I walk back up the ladder? So Tupac Shakur, a rapper from here in America that is deceased now, but he spoke once about roses that grow from concrete. And what he was talking about was the youth that have emerged in defiance of like socially toxic environments. They've come out of a situation, okay, where you think, oh man, they have to overcome so much. Well, guess what? They can. Okay. But this requires us to not have a deficit mindset of those homes. It requires us to call out systemic racism in our society. Sometimes this systemic racism was intentionally designed and purposed to privilege white people or wealthy people with no accountability and too much counterblame. We lay it all on the feet of those that we have othered. And so this is where Dr. Duncan Andrade comes in with this idea of critical hope, okay? Material hope. These are those cracks in the concrete. So that flower could not grow without those cracks happening, okay? And then Socratic hope. That is that journey through the cracks, okay? And audacious hope. That is when we stand in solidarity with people that are facing inequities, that are that we say, I am here, I am willing, I'm ready to take action with you. I move from being just an ally to be what's the word? From moving from that allyship to being a part of the solution. I'm going to take action. Okay, the word is accomplice. I'm an accomplice in this hope now. Okay, and that's where I want to live. So what are the cracks in the concrete then? This is where quality teaching comes in. Okay, this is where we start thinking about social justice education. And this is where we start using connected resources and networks. Okay, so whether it be like social workers or counselors and such, parent liaisons within our schools to help it. So these are the ways that we can start to help everyone in our classroom make and find those cracks in the concrete. Again, they can't grow, they can't emerge, unless that crack is there. And so we can help make that sure that opportunity for growth is possible. Juan Carlos, you're eating up the chat. I love it. Thank you very much. Now, when we think about journeying through those cracks, okay, this is where it requires courage, okay? Because guess what? It's going to be painful. It's going to be painful, but it humanizes them, okay? We have to provide a space in our classroom that is caring, that is supportive for that journey. I know you're going to go through a lot to overcome these inequities. These are systemic things, okay? These are, whether it's within our school or within our society, and you are working through it, and I am here for you, and I'm going to love and care for you, and I'm going to give you all of the supports necessary to make sure that these inequities don't define you. So keep that critical hope alive and well in your school, all right? And how do we do this? We start looking at equitable curriculum that is designed for agency, okay? Are you educating the whole child? Okay, are you using all of those elements of the PYP? The knowledge, the conceptual understanding, the skills, the dispositions that are within the learner profile? Are you integrating culturally responsive pedagogies, meaning you are developing your own cultural intelligence, okay? And looking at certain archetypes like collectivism versus individualism, okay? Are you using storytelling, okay? Are you using group work? Is your classroom rooted in competitiveness instead of cooperation? Okay, is your classroom mostly affixed to written traditions instead of the oral traditions? All of those things, those are pieces that we can start to take control. And yes, I hope I'm saying it right, Roddy. This is not only this is not only a teacher issue. This is a principal, head of school, society issue, okay? But we all have to be working. We can't just blame someone else. We can't wait for someone else to do something. We have to start it. Yes, and we have to check our privilege and move from there. Okay, excellent. All right, and so then we want to design learning that sparks engagement and connection. Okay, we want to use provocations. We want those provocations allow for all of the identities to show up. Okay, how does if I'm a soccer player, how does that identity be able to show up as I approach a new learning experience? How does being a brother or a sister or a reader or a child or an employee or whatever it is, how do any of those identities allow me to bring them to the curriculum, okay, in the context that we are learning in? How then and my, without those identities, I can't transfer my conceptual understandings. I can't transfer my prior knowledge and connect it to what we're learning today. If your provocations limit what I can bring to the situation, then my ability to transfer and apply prior knowledge and experiences and previous learning, all that stuff to the situation is going to be limited, and it might be a design problem and not a child problem. When I teach for transfer through that conceptual curriculum, it embodies those constructivism beliefs. It honors the funds of knowledge. Again, everything I can bring to that learning opportunity is there for me to make those conceptual connections. It promotes learning that goes beyond the confines of any scheduling. So if I have to do my reading now or my social studies later, whatever it is, if I'm teaching for understanding, then I can start to bridge those gaps that may be a systemic issue with the scheduling, but I'm giving students the tools that are necessary for that. And then ultimately opening the door for social constructivism, okay? That means we're going to use this idea of constructing understanding to make the world a better place, okay? That might require some critical race theory, okay? Engaging with these types of social constructivism to not only learn, but learn so that we change the world. And again, this, when we think of roses growing in concrete, this changes it from a rose growing in concrete. It changes our classroom from the concrete to a rose garden. Okay, that's critical hope. Okay, making that rose garden come alive in our classroom. Is your classroom a rose garden? Is your school a rose garden? If it's not, if it's just concrete, then that's the work we have to do. And, we also have to think about the way the brain learns, okay? It goes through this process of input through the senses, okay? And elaborating by connecting to everything again, and then reviewing and making sure that we're able to build in opportunities for the brain to myelinate, okay, to build those neural pathways, okay, for that neuroplasticity to still be an active part of our day. And a great strategy for this is the Ignite, Chunk, Chew, Review strategy, okay? Ignite learning through your provocations, or by telling students what we're going to focus on, which might be just an inquiry question for the day. And then chunk it in brain aligned amounts of information so that the brain doesn't become too overloaded, and give students a chance to chew on that information through talking, through journaling, through drawing, all of these different ways. And then opportunities to review learning, review after about 20 minutes, review after 24 hours, review after a week, review after a month, review 3 months down the road, okay? Continue to strengthen the myelination on those neural pathways. And then collaboratively construct learning outcomes and success criteria. Build that relationship with your students. Make sure you have high expectations for all. Be dedicated to inclusion, access, depth of learning, okay, depth of relationship, okay, and monitor that learning. Make sure that assessment is integrative, okay? Make sure assessment is collaborative, and make sure assessment is goal-driven, okay? Those are the things. Don't wait till the end. Don't wait till the summative assessment to find out if they got it or not. I'll integrate that monitoring of learning. So in final, what way is your curriculum best designed for equity? And what challenges to equity still exist in your curriculum? I want to leave you with thinking about those questions. Equity is a personal a curriculum, personal problem, it is a curriculum problem, it is a systemic problem, okay? It is a pedagogy problem, okay? Equity has to be what we design learning and classrooms for. And here's a final call to action, that audacious hope or audacious agency. And I'm going to read this to you. We dream of schools in which students and teachers both have voice, where they are not afraid to share their honest opinions and concerns. They ask questions and try new things, where they are learners, instructors, and advocates alongside one another and collaborating with one another, where they are afforded regular opportunities to listen, learn, and lead. That's the goal. That's why we're all here today. That's the solidarity that we are looking for. That's the audacious hope that Dr. Andrade imagined. So thank you very much for joining me today. I hope this was a powerful session for you and beneficial. Sorry, we ran a little over on the time there, but here is my contact information. Please reach out to me anytime through email at chipster6498@yahoo.com, or you can find me on Twitter under @PD in 140 or less. And then there's my YouTube channel where I'll also be sharing this video as well from today. So thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. If anyone has questions and wants to stay on longer, I will gladly entertain those. So I'm going to stop the recording and feel free to unmute yourself if you need to.